Okay. She probably says that to all the boys.
You're being recorded, Todd, so watch what you say.
What you say.
It's time to go off.
You're in a different spot today. Or wait, you're in South Dakota, aren't you?
I'm in Rapid City.
How long are you around?
I go back August 3rd, I think.
Dang, it'd be good to see you. I haven't seen you for like
a decade, more than a decade, probably.
At least.
Well, I am going to be, I plan on coming back for the festival.
Oh, okay.
In October, since it's in Deadwood, and I'm going to be back here. My son has his thing going on, so.
That's awesome. Well, I'll see you then for sure then.
Inshallah.
Yeah, right. We have to figure out some way to say if the COVIDs allow it too, you know.
That's right.
If the COVIDs and Allah.
Yes. There's a lot of ifs.
Maybe they could work together on it or something, you know.
Yeah, we're planning on it. We hope, you know, nothing else. Who knows? All this weird stuff they're saying now. The Delta variant. I don't even know anymore. I can't. It's hard to even keep track of what to do.
I don't think anybody can. Huh?
Well, should we get started here?
I would think so.
We have a few more trickle in.
Okay. All right, so we're going to get started. Today we're going to be talking about our prison system. Most societies, not all, most societies have some kind of prison system, some kind of system where those people who, let's say, create bigger problems for the community can be removed from it so as to allow for the continuation and the smoother running of the society. All of those people who tend to, let's say, bump up against whatever the direction in which everyone is going. So that's a big, broad spectrum. Now, then it gets sticky because it's like, well, why is that person disturbing the rest of society? They may be mentally ill. They may have a legitimate grievance. Things are like actually not going well for them. And they can't find relief in some other way. And sometimes it's just the people who are in power don't like that person challenging their authority. So they figure, well, it's easier if we just kind of like take this person out. Now, sometimes it's just go and kill that person. But then other times, if they do that, then sometimes it has untoward effects. In other words, okay, you kill my cousin, I'm going to kill one of your cousins. I don't care which one, just I'm going to kill one, you know. So people started figuring out a way that, well, you know, that eye for an eye thing, that's not really working out too well for us. We're going to have some more orderly way in which we control people. And so you end up with some kind of judicial system. And of course, if you're going to do that, you have to have some basis on which you say this person we put in prison and these other people we don't. Oh, there is another thing. If you put too many people in prison, then it's counterproductive. One, you take those people out of the workforce. And then two, you've aggrieved a whole bunch of people, and pretty soon you have essentially more people outside, let's say off the boat than on the boat, and they will sometimes tip the boat, you know. So there are some reasons why you don't really want to have all that many people in a prison system. Now, some societies, they have only a few people that ever go to prison. They have prisons, but they don't put many people in it. They have other ways that they deal with people other than sending them into prison. Now, I'm sure there are many others, but I can speak to the ones that I know about. And I will speak most prominently of Japan, because it is one of the countries that has the fewest people per capita in prison. Young people almost never go to prison. It's very rare that you have like children going to prison. They have a lot of other systems in which they deal with people who are even antisocial. Okay. And interestingly enough, they have less crime, and you would think, well, if prisons, reduce crime, then, then they would have lots of it and we would have hardly none. But unless you can make the case that Japanese are somehow uh, inherently better people, genetically or something like that, then you have to start thinking, well, what is it in their society that they're doing that allows them to have so many fewer people in prison than, let's say, one of the leading country per capita of people in prison is the United States. The leading country, far and away. Then the other thing is South Dakota is one of the leading states per capita for people. Now, one of the oddest things that I found about this is that North Dakota, right next door to us, their demographics, weather, all kinds of things, all of the things that you have controls for, they're almost identical to ours. Right? They have the same number of like native populations. They have pretty much the same kind of farming and rural to urban population, same religions, pretty much, not so much different, And sometimes people say it should be East and West South Dakota more than North and South Dakota, because actually we could have stayed just one Dakota really, because it's so similar. What do you change when you go across the North Dakota border? If you didn't see a sign, you wouldn't know anything changed. They don't speak French or anything like that, so you're not in Canada yet. So that is one of the things that I want to sort of keep in the background, is that there are these different people have prisons for different ways, and different people, for different reasons, and different people handle their aberrant population, the people who don't sort of fall in line. They find other ways to handle it other than prisons. So what I would like to explore first with all of you is, what would you want a prison system to accomplish? And we have a prison system, and we're likely to have one for the foreseeable future. But what is it that you would like a prison system to do, for to accomplish? Let's put it that way. Any ideas?
Well, I think one of the things that, it's designed to do, I'm not saying that it does, but it's designed to reduce recidivism, right? Make people so that they don't repeat, criminal acts or criminal behaviors. You'd want that to be the solution for any crime, of someone who's committed a crime, to not do it again. And this always comes down to the argument, about prisons, and do they help with that at all, or where do they help and where do they hinder, kind of.
So if I'm understanding you, Todd, your thing that you would like to see a prison system do is be, let's say, a correctional system. In other words, people their behavior, attitudes, or whatever caused them to commit the crime, somehow you correct that. Am I reading you right, or
yeah, absolutely. That'd be the goal you'd want to have, regardless of what, if someone has broken a law that has been put in place, that has been supported enough to be written and codified, and it's broken, you'd want someone to be able to understand it, or get to the root of that, whatever it is that caused them to break that law, and solve for that problem.
Okay. All
So,
right.
yeah.
So that's one objective of a prison system would be to correct undesirable behaviors.
You would hope, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Anyone else? That's so correctional. That's why we call it Department of Corrections. It's supposed to correct something, as you point out. We don't. That's still to be decided to what degree something is corrected. But okay, that is at least somewhere in the background. That's an objective. Anyone else?
I would say I agree with Todd. And also to protect the rest of society that from the actions that the individuals are doing until they realize that their actions are wrong or until they can be rehabilitated. That would be a big one for me. Like I want to be protected from the people who are killing, molesting, driving drunk until they can be rehabilitated and hopefully come out as a person who understands that that's wrong and not do it again.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so protection of the society at large by removing those who would harm the rest of us. We separate those people out. Am I reading you right there, Carol?
Yes.
Okay, good. Anyone else ideas about what a prison system could/should try to accomplish?
I think that you're coming up with not nice, but reasonable goals of what a prison does, knowing it wasn't such a thing as an incarceration a few hundred years ago. Why South Dakota has more than North Dakota, I think there needs to be a study of which system has the best record of, I think they need to do research first, of the success of their ability to help and to understand the different cultures in prisons, as well as the psychological effects that these people have had on their human behavior from backgrounds or whatever. But I think if you measure the goals that we have thought about, we need to think largely about what the end result we want. And if protection is the only way, it's treating them with less respect than I think we should as human beings.
Excellent, excellent. Any other ideas that you have? Thank you for that, Lee. Anybody else? By the way, Ryan's hearing some kind of alert or beep or something. Do any of you guys hear that too? The rest of you hear that?
I don't.
You don't? Okay. Anybody else?
I'd heard it for a little bit, but I haven't been hearing it in the last few minutes.
Okay.
Well, anyway, don't worry. I just kept hearing us beeping. I was wondering.
No. Hold on one second. I'm going to check the other computer to see if there's something happening over there. Weird. 1 second.
And I'm hoping it wasn't me. I muted myself after that just to make sure.
Well, Lawrence was the only one who was unmuted, so I just figured it was from his.
I think it's God calling him.
Probably.
That's happened before, but I don't listen. Later, I'll get back to you. Anyway, I can't hear anything on my side. I don't have any beeping on my side.
Okay,
So,
it's not a big deal. I was just curious.
all right. Okay. All right. So, we have rehabilitation and protection of society. Okay. Those are reasonable things that you would like to see a prison system / correctional system accomplish. Okay. Donna is saying she goes with rehabilitate as well. Though that she thinks that's a good idea. That's a good goal, good idea. Okay, so go ahead.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
How many of you people, and we don't have that many, but have visited this penitentiary and taking tours of it and seeing what is truly going on? How many of you talked to the deputies that have been released and get his and her viewpoints? How much of that research has been done by our leaders in this state?
Well, I will say, because how do they say on radio, for full disclosure, I'm actually a chaplain at the prison. So I go in all the time, and when I leave here, finish this today, I'll be on my way again to the prison. And I do, I spend quite a bit of time up there. So I'm kind of talking from behind the walls, as well as a person who's out in the world, that those people who are in prison will be released to, well, at least most of them, at some point. Okay. And hence the conversation really is about, how do people see what we should be accomplishing? So from the prison's point of view, they have kind of 3 goals. The first goal is to protect the public, to take people out of the society who, these are stated goals. There's controversy, okay? But to take people out who create an endangerment to others, right? And there are clearly some people who, let's say they haven't figured it out yet, or they don't, or there are other things, maybe they figured it out, but they figured wrong, or maybe their emotional state doesn't allow them to follow their rational state, right? In other words, there are people who go around and they're perfectly nice people that you'd be happy to have them as your neighbor, but every once in a while, something will hit them in the wrong way, and the emotional part goes off, and anything and anyone that's in, striking distance has a problem, And, there are other people who have clear mental disorders. And some time ago, our former president, Ronald Reagan, basically closed down. He started in California, and then that insight spread to the rest of the country. They started closing down mental institutions and just basically releasing people onto the street. Those people in no time at all create a huge crime wave. The public starts saying, oh, we got to do something about crime. Crime is getting out of hand. Well, yeah, you just threw all the nutcases out in the street. And then, so we started putting people who were mentally ill into prisons, and the prison staff were not ready to deal with those people. They didn't have people who were trained to deal with the mentally ill, even diagnose or say, this guy he's off of it, Now, sometimes in the process of taking those people to court, it has been it has been revealed that those people had some mental illness. And in some cases, they have prisons for them criminally insane, right? But I have not seen that they are really trying to rehabilitate or straighten out those people. Well, let's say don't seem to be doing a very good job at it, whatever they might say on paper. So we end up with the prison for the criminally insane. And then we have prisons where the people who do have mental disorders, and I'm not the one to say they're insane or what, I don't do that kind of diagnosis. And anyway, it's case by case. But we clearly, from my observation, when you see somebody who's operating at the level of a 10-year-old and they're in prison, then you know that there's something different about the prison system when that person's like 40 or 50 years old. But their ability to converse with you or to do things is on the level of a 10-year-old. Then you have to think, you know, even if this guy got out, what would he do? You know, how would he live? You know, but we don't have any, apparently we don't have any place for them, right? And additionally, when that person does a crime, the public wants revenge. That's one thing that nobody said, but it's a thing out there in the public, is they want revenge. He hurt somebody, he should be hurt too, or she, you know. There should be some pain, not because it's going to fix anything, but because there's a certain sense of inequality or lack of resonance, dissonance. If this person, no matter what their reason, there should be some pain inflicted. For example, a person is driving along and, you know, the wheel falls off their car and they go and they maybe plow into 2 or 3 people and kill some people. There's a certain sense in the public that this person, they in some way they should be punished, even though there was nothing that person could have anticipated or done or anything like that. And there is no particular product or anything that's going to happen either for the dead or the living as a result of punishing this person. Nothing will be corrected. You know, no one will experience any particular, let's say, a verifiable gain from punishing this person. But there's a certain sense from a large number of people that somebody should be punished, you know. And there was a time in our society when if you were rich, people would let you have something called a whipping boy. So if there was a whipping that was involved, they would allow you to pick one of your slaves or servants or somebody that you could pay, and they would take the whipping for you, right? Instead of you. You could pay somebody to do that. But the public seemed to be okay with that. Well, as long as somebody's hurt, we don't really care if it's the person who did the crime, but somebody should be hurt. You know, something should hurt. At one time, people say, well, how about we sacrifice a goat? Goat didn't do anything. But if we kill a goat, we just sort of feel like, you know, it's like, okay, the goat bled. It was screaming. It didn't want to be killed. And somebody killed it anyway. I'm good because now I feel okay. Something was killed, you know. Then people got more serious and say, well, you know, like goat. Okay, 5 goats? Nah, not 5. We want a person to be hurt, you know? So, so now I guess, you know, we allow somebody, that the actual person who committed the crime, at least in the United States, I think that's the overwhelming consensus, is that the person who did the tort or the crime should do the time or whatever other punishment that's involved. But then that gets back to, what do we want the system to accomplish? You know, I'd like you to keep thinking about that, because there are some other things that could be accomplished in a prison system. Oh, I didn't finish my thought about what the prison system says it wants to do. It's when we got training, because we get the same training as chaplains, we get the same training as the guards minus the weapons stuff. We don't do weapons, so there's no reason for us to do that. They do teach us about the spray and, you know, and what it does, how to use it, you know, how to stop a fight or something like that, or protect yourself if, you know, if you're being accosted. Not that, you know, 30% of the people, the spray doesn't even work on them, but okay, that's another story. So the first objective is to protect the public. And the second objective in a prison system is to protect the inmates from each other. And third, if there are resources still remaining, is to try to rehabilitate. Okay. And it's only recently that we can see, I say recently mean 10 to 20 years, that we can see some gradual efforts being made toward rehabilitation. And oddly enough, it seems to have been motivated by the fact that someone discovered that, you know, this prison thing is getting a bit expensive. We look at our budget here and we have a lot of money going into law enforcement. And we don't see that it's doing all that much good. We're getting more criminals and it's getting more expensive. Right? Now, if that was the welfare system, we would be saying, oh no, we got to turn this around. Right? So someone finally got around to saying, you know, maybe we ought to take a different look because we're not getting the desired results, but we're paying more. Okay. So there is currently some interest in rehabilitating the system, you know, of rehabilitation. So stay tuned, and I can talk about some of those, but I think I want to take it back to you guys to talk about what kinds of things you could imagine that a correctional system, let's put it that way, a correctional system could do. What would you want these people to be like when they come out? What would you want to happen for them or to them? Think about that. Think about that. Now, that becomes a very important question because if you don't know where you're going, any road will take you there because you'll just be wandering around. And so in order to get something done, you first need to know what it is you want to do. If you say, well, this system isn't working, well, that's great. It's good, you know, the 50,000 foot view. No, it's not working. But what is it that's not working? And what would you like to change? Some of it is partly the correctional system, but a lot of that is us too. You know, a lot of that is us. That's why this conversation about it is because the next question, what it leads to is like, if we know what we want for these inmates, then the reasonable next question is what little thing or big thing could any or each of us do, not to solve the problem by ourselves necessarily, that's unlikely, but what could we do to encourage developments in that direction? Okay, so what could we do that maybe if the recidivism rate now is 25%, actually it's 75%, so let's get real. In the first 5 years, that means 75% of the people who get out of prison in 5 years, they'll be back. If we wanted to reduce that even to 74%, what would we do? You know, we could work on 73 and 50 and 25%. Todd?
Yeah, you know, I don't, obviously there's a zillion things that are to be addressed in something like that. But one thing I remember, it's been probably 15 years ago or so, that there was a program introduced here that at the time I thought, you know, it may not be applicable to everyone, but it would help in this area, which is, it was a program that brought victims of crime and the people who were charged and found guilty together after sentence or even during while they're serving sentences, and kind of, opening up some kind of dialogue between those two parties and what it could do as far as, I don't know if it's full rehabilitation, but I think it is a sense of, for both, something beyond retribution and something beyond, just serving time, because they had to, facing consequences when you realize it's a real person is probably greater than just waiting out the clock. And for the families who are willing to go into this program, it got them to look at, actually, they were often very helpful in helping the person who was found, who had committed the crime, kind of reintegrate when they came out. I mean, it was but I know it can't work on a mass scale, but I remember just thinking, that kind of thinking is a good line to follow. It may not always be that program, because obviously that can only work in certain situations, but it was a good line to follow, that, you have to make those who have been imprisoned people to the people who look at them as just prisoners. And the prisoners have to have some hope that they can reintegrate. Without those two things, you will have absolute recidivism. The people will not be able to function in that kind of world, because if you're coming out and there's no opening, you're going to almost certainly recommit whatever behavior you had before. And if you are the public who just looks at people who have been charged with crimes as only prisoners, they will not give them any opportunity, and so I thought it was a good line to follow. And quickly, the one case that they followed on, because it was one of our reporters had reported this, used an example. There was a young man who had been huffing that aerosol cleaner and had passed out, and his truck took off running through like this neighborhood in a school zone, and crashed into this poor guy who was just waiting out front, who was like a top student at the school mines, and he never fully recovered. The guy never graduated, and it was a hard road. So those were obviously not easy situations, but their willingness to go and work together always amazed me. So I always think, boy, there's got to be people, certainly situations easier than that hopefully people could work through in that kind of line.
Very good point. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I agree with Todd, 100%. Like, I would say that education would be huge, and it's education of our correctional officers, because like you mentioned earlier, Lawrence, they get a lot of inmates that they've never been trained on how to handle these different things. So how are they supposed to help? How are they supposed to fix this problem? How are they supposed to rehabilitate or correct these actions that they've never dealt with before? So the education has to start there, first of all, but then educating the society, like Todd said, these are people, they're more than just criminals. And a lot of criminals, or a lot of inmates, aren't bad people. They made a bad choice, or they had something bad happen to them. But until the rest of society realizes that, okay, they sat in the corner, they did their punishment, but they still need to be trained on how to come out and live after that. Because if you were in a car accident and you kill somebody and you go to jail for that, you're being punished for that. But the effect that it's having on the rest of your life mentally is more punishment than anything else. Then you've got to be trained on how to go back into society and get past that and relive your life and reintegrate and feel like people are going to accept you and not just look at you as a prisoner. If you go to prison and you come out and for the rest of your life, everybody just says, it's like having a target on your back that says, I'm an inmate. I was an inmate. I was an inmate. Like, they're not treated the same. And I get that some people will have hard feelings, and maybe the program like Todd is talking about would be great. I don't know how you could do that on a large scale, but I think it has to start with just some basic education on everybody. And is there ways that our system can spend money on the programs? There are a few good programs while people are incarcerated to help them, but what about the programs after they get out? Who helps them after they get out? And so I have a relative that's in prison right now. He has been several times. And last time he got out, he went to a home and they were helping him. But at some point, for whatever reason, his time in that home ran out, but he wasn't ready to not have help anymore. And so what did he do? He turned to the friends, quote unquote friends, that he thought he could get help from. Well, those are the same people that ended him in prison the first time. And guess where he is now? He's back in the system because he didn't know where to turn for help. He felt like everywhere he went, every job he applied for, yes, I made mistakes in my life. Now I can't get a good enough job to feed myself. So what do I do? Where do I get the food from? You know, how do I move on? And I think we need that education for them when they get out. We need the education for society on how to integrate these people. We need more acceptance is a huge word overall. I mean, whether you're talking about race, prisoners, anything, we need more acceptance in this world that people do make mistakes. Now I get it. Like, some people do horrible things for us. Apparently, we don't know the reasons, right? And it's hard to not look at them as that. But I would like to believe that there's not a human being in the world that just goes off and kills somebody's child because they think it's fun. Like, there's something wrong. There's something that person needs help with. And I think that's where society fails a lot, is we don't accept that there can be things wrong. There's such a stigma over mental health still these days. And a lot of it boils down to people's mental health. They need help and we don't have the ability to give them help, or we don't have the patience, or we don't have the desire. We just hope that it doesn't happen to us, I guess. I don't know. I don't know what the answer is, Lawrence. I wish I did, but I do think a lot of it starts with education, educating our correctional officers. They don't have the training and the education that they need. Educating our inmates, educating the society about what these people go through. It's, you know, we work really hard on educating, we're trying to work hard on educating our veterans on how to reintegrate when they come home from war, you know, and how to educate society on how to accept them. It's the same thing with the inmates. It's just a different kind of war. That's my opinion.
Well, I don't think any of us have answers, Carolyn. I mean, the answer, but all of us together can find better answers than we have now. And that's why everybody has something to contribute, and we put it all in the pot and see what kind of stew we can make, you know. And I think that you raised some very good questions. Whether you have answers to them or not, you did the important thing, is to raise some questions. And part of that question is, what do we as a society do to help normalize the people who have been in prison? Because, you know, you make the excellent point that, you know, if you've been in prison for a while, it's like Rip Van Winkle. You come out and you know, it's like, I talk to prisoners who are former inmates who come out, and the one that struck me, I'll share this with you, because I think what he said to me was the most succinct positioning of the problem that I've heard. He said, when I came into prison, the scariest sound I had ever heard was the doors locking behind me. He said 20 years later or so, when I was leaving the prison, the scariest sound that I had ever heard was the doors closing behind me. That's deep, you know? And what he said was, look, when that door closed, I realized that everybody that I knew and loved was in the prison. I had been in there, and in the 20 years had lost contact with pretty much everybody else on the face of the earth certainly none of them knew me like the inmates knew me, because you're guys that you fought with, played with, even showered with. You ate with them, you even showered. Who showers with their family? Okay, some of you, but most of you don't, you know? But these people, that's how close they were, you know? You know the guy almost by his smell, you know? And not that it's a big thing, you know what I mean? It's not like this guy is a horrible smeller. It's just like, no, everybody has a certain sense of them. You can feel them. When you go outside of the prison, you have none of that. You have no friends. You don't have even a place to stay many times. They give you the $50. And what do you do with $50 in South Dakota in the winter? What is that anyway? Right? So if you don't have anything and anybody, it's a setup to go back. Now, that's not the job of the correctional institution. At least that's not in their quote mission statement, is to create the infrastructure for this person to go back into society. Now, if they're out on parole, there are some things that people do because, their parole violations, people have to show up and then they have to be in a halfway house and stuff like that. Okay, great. Not great, really. It's better than a poke in the eye with a hot stick, because a lot of that stuff doesn't work either. But at least there's some effort. When you flat, in other words, you're out of the system now because you did all the time, you finished your sentence, there is nothing for you. There is no halfway house because you're not halfway. The halfway houses are reserved for those people pretty much who are halfway, And additional to that, if you've been a gang member, if you have something involving a sex crime, if you have something involving harming minors or something like that, you'll be tasked with knowing where you can be and where you cannot be without the aid of even a map. Okay? We don't have a map that we can hand the inmate who has those restrictions and say, okay, see these places where it's red, you can't go there. And the places where it's blue, you could be there, but not for more than a half an hour. Right? We don't have a map like that. We just tell the inmate, that okay, you're in restricted, you can't be in restricted zones, but we don't really make it clear where the borders of those restricted zones are. So it's kind of a setup, for a person who hasn't been dealing with society. That means that there are certain supermarkets you can't go to, right? That means there are certain friends that you can't visit. You don't know who those friends are, right? Because you don't know where they live, and so if you don't even have a physical map, let alone a mental map of where these places are, you're in constant danger of being violated, right? So that's just sort of like the ground floor. So then you have the problem of like, okay, you've been looking at gray walls for 20 years, and now you walk into a mall. Now, on one hand, you think, oh, wow, fun. We got, no more gray walls. You got color and stuff, but that's overwhelming to the brain. You got noises that you have never heard, and you don't know what those noises mean or what it is. And noises are funny. If you're in a place and you sort of say, oh, you can identify the noise, it almost goes to the background. You don't notice it until it stops, But if you've never heard not just one noise, hundreds of noises, and you see colors and things moving and things in the corner of your eye and the peripheral vision and all that, it's horrible. It can be horrifying. You go to a grocery store and almost none of the foods that you see are anything that you recognize as food when you left. And when you're in prison, you saw none of that. Like, how do you cook this stuff? What is this vegetable? What is this fruit? What is this thing in the can? What is that stuff on the side of the can that just says that's what's in the ingredients? What is it? You don't know any of that. Now, if you had 1, 2, 10 of those problems, okay, maybe you could cope. If you got all of them all at once, good luck. That's going to be tough. Okay. So most of the people who are to some degree successful, I would say the one thing they have in common is a support system when they get out. And then that's where we get into, well, is a society ready to give them the support that they need in order to, in order to, how can I say, to function again. So that turns to the question of what kind of support can you imagine first that an inmate might need? What kind of support would you think they might need? Or did I burn your brains out already with all that? Okay, how about information? How about information? Anybody think that that would be something that a society could provide inmates? And if so, in what form? What kinds of information might a society provide for people who have been incarcerated for a long period of time and just doesn't know how things work?
Because I don't know people as they come out. Obviously I've had friends who've been in prison, and I mean most people have, or at least they know, or family members, or along the line. Because like you said, a lot of people in the US end up in prison or in jail at some point. But I think one of the things is, a lot of times it is just to have an advocate. I know, because I always think like, halfway houses, they do some reintegration things. They do help in some ways, right? They have some minor connections that they occasionally can lean on, but it really isn't an advocate. It's not an advocate kind of way. So when people are in distress, like you said, when they have so many things dealing at them, it would be good, I suppose, to have some form of an advocate. Programs that deal with people who are likely to recommit whatever offense it is, whether it's crime or like alcoholism or addiction. One of the main elements is to have an advocate, have someone that can help, because I think you cover a lot of areas. It gets down to a personal thing. It talks about they have information that you may not have, or they may know someone who has information. It covers a broader stroke. But that's resource, and I think that it always comes down to. People, I think, the difficulty for society at large generally is that punitive side that you talk about. They don't look at it though as an economic thing, because people who end up back in prison, they cost you a bunch of money, but that cost is never talked about. It's just like, oh, you're going off to prison, so and it continues to cost you money. But if you could invest ahead of time, just like if you could have invested ahead of time, a lot of times, like you say, for counseling for people who have mental problems before they end up in prison, but once they've committed a crime, there's a path. So at least there, you should say, okay, we should have some form of advocate, or some way, someone that can be on their side that would help. That isn't old friends and family that potentially maybe they got them in that place, or they're the reason without even knowing. Some family situations people end up in drive them into behaviors that they don't want to be in. If you had someone apart from that old system that could be their advocate, that they would be responsible to some level, but more realistically just be someone they could go to, that could be, acting on their behalf. And I know, you talk about cost, this is a thing, but I think, no, and they talk about studies and stuff, the cost is obvious to us. Look at the money we spend. I mean, it's just insane, but we can't divorce it from that just, deep-seated kind of, well, they did something wrong, they must pay. But we're the ones who end up paying a lot of the time, at least economically. And I think that's one way to speak to people, because some of the most ardent people who are really big and, have that feeling of like retribution. If you say, well, it's going to cost you this much out of your pocketbook, they may understand that. Anyway.
Yeah.
I am now off my soapbox.
But that's exactly my experience. In fact, 3 or 4 days ago, I was having a loose chat in the coffee shop. Actually, it's a convenience store where I was getting coffee. And this guy was on a rant about how, the system wasn't severe enough and these people should be really paying for their crimes. And so I said, are you willing to pay for it? It's like 60 grand a year or something like that. It's like, and why would you be okay with paying that, but not paying for the guy's schooling at a quarter of the price, And we can show you definitively that people who have college degrees are much less likely to go to prison. And those with a college degree and a job, they're not the kind of people typically, in some cases, but they're not typically the kind of people who rob stores, who even do drug deals, and if they do, they're in the top tier of the drug deal, and you don't put those people in prison anyway, so they're not a thing, But I think I fundamentally agree with you, Todd, but there's a part that says, I don't know that people do know how much it's costing them. I think they know it must cost something. It's not free, but they don't really have a sense of how much it's costing them versus what they're paying or would pay for school. And you say, look, if you have 12,000 people or so in the South Dakota prison system, and you multiply what it costs you to keep them in prison, and you say, suppose I make a proposition to you that if you are an inmate, okay, if you're a dangerous society, like let's say, for example, you killed a whole bunch of people, you horribly murdered somebody, and you can probably be pegged as a sociopath or somebody, okay, you don't count. You don't count. You don't get a pass because we don't know what to do with you, okay? But let's say if you're a kid or a young person who got caught with a reefer in his pocket and you're doing 5 years. And we say to you, look, we're going to pay your way through school and make sure you have 3 squares. You're not going to be living high off the hog, but you can get 3 squares a day. And if you go to school and your grade level is above a C average and you keep it above that and you finish school, we will not only let you out of prison and off this parole thing, we will expunge your record. So it doesn't look like you ever went to prison. If that's all, if that's all it's about, you're good to go, right? If you complete this and get your graduate degree. Now you ask the public, would you be willing to pay for that? It's going to cost you half as much or less than keeping the person in prison. Would you be willing to pay for that? Would that be okay with you? And watch people's face. Watch their faces and watch them, that thing, the lump in their throat, because you've made them a perfectly reasonable proposition, but emotionally, they don't seem to be ready to accept something that's clearly in their interest. That's why when I'm talking to inmates about prison reform, I say, where you start? With your mama and daddy, with your friends, with your girlfriends, so-called girlfriends. You start with those people and you get them to create a vocal group for inmates, right? Somebody to speak up for you, because believe it or not, Now, to illustrate what I mean about how the public feels about inmates, at Christmas time in the prison, all of the chaplains get together, and through the good graces of the various churches pitching in, it's one of the few things that everybody kind of works together on. We provide some, at Christmas time, only at Christmas time, we provide a little bag of fudge that's made by the church. It costs the system nothing, not for the bags, not for, they don't have staffing things. The chaplains take care of everything. But yet, unceasingly, I should say, the governor, whoever that governor is, can count on getting letters of protest that the inmates got fudge at Christmas. Right? It's not even a thing like for the cost or anything like that. It doesn't cost anything. It's fudge at Christmas, for Pete's sake. Handmade fudge. And it's not like you get a box of it. It's a little bag saying Merry Christmas, and here's a little something for those who love you and thinking of you. And people, I'm not saying everybody in the state, but the fact to me that anybody takes the time to write a letter to the governor to complain about inmates getting fudge, you must have a really boring life if that's all you got to do. So, but that tells me that prison reform is not going to start at the prison. Prison reform is going to start in the public and with a change of attitude, because even with the money, I don't know that we can, we can sell the money thing to a certain extent, but I have a distinct feeling that people will find some kind of reason, because in their heart of hearts, their heart doesn't feel that. And again, we're not talking about people who are going to go and chop up babies or something, We're talking about the kid who got, he got caught with the residue, of, of the thing in his system, because in South Dakota, if you have it in your system, that's like the same as you have it, So, and he could have been in a room where people was all smoking dope, because I know I've been in the room where people have lit up a hibachi stove with a kilo of grass in it. I didn't even like the stuff, but I can't stop breathing. You know what I mean? So, and I wasn't antisocial enough to say, oh, you guys are all wrong or something. Not my thing, but it's your thing. But homie and I don't like it. But hey, who am I to judge, So I'm saying, like, you could be in a, in a situation where it's, you're not really a threat to society, but still people, So I just bring all those things up to see us, to bring out that it's something for us to think about. How would we like to see the prison system reformed? And if you have ideas, please, please, please let me know, because I'm working on it. And I like to crowdsource these kinds of things, because I think that that we together we can come up with something that's better than we have now. Anything anybody wants to say before we close this off?
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Conversation. Well put, and I agree, the public needs educating. Open their eyes.
Yes.
Work with volunteers. I'm going to.
Mm-hmm. Anybody who wants to volunteer, let me know. I'll get you the paperwork. And pretty much no matter what religion you are, there's probably somebody who will accept you in, for whatever their, whatever their denomination is, they can find a place for you. And to a person, people grow when they involve that work. I can say personally, I have gotten a lot more out of it than I could even imagine I could give. The interaction has created a different me than the me that started going there years ago. So I would recommend it, but it's not for everybody. You know, for a lot of people, they walk into a prison, and when that door shuts behind them, it sets off all kinds of bells, and people walking around, and and they suddenly realize that they're locked in, with inmates, and they emotionally, intellectually they can rationalize everything, but emotionally, for whatever reason, they can't handle it. But you won't know that until you do it. And fortunately, if you walk in and feel that and want to turn around and walk right back out, no harm, no foul. We can find a way. We do. Well, with that, I guess I should go to prison then. We'll see you guys next week on a brand new show.
Thanks, Lawrence.
You betcha.